We don't talk about this a lot, but the skill and the ability to make the right decision under pressure is so underrated. Have you ever been in a messy situation and thought, I knew this wasn't right? And that moment hits you like a rock out of nowhere. Not after it fell apart, but when you were right in the middle of everything. In that exact moment, probably the same pattern was happening all over again. You notice something, you paused, and then you move on anyway. If you're new here, hi, I'm Tiffany, and this is a part of my Lead Yourself series. If you want to make better decisions at work or in relationships without disappearing, overreacting, or quietly losing influence, I hope you find this series helpful. In episode 1, we talked about tension as the early signal. In episode 4, we talked about how staying calm without clarity slowly turns into resentment. Today, we're going back to the second that mattered. Before resentment, before you made up your mind, before visible conflict. Today, we're going to talk about the final signal. So here's my hot take on regrets. Most people think regret comes from bad outcomes or bad results. But in my opinion, I don't think regrets solely come from the endings. It comes from overridden feelings and judgments, meaning the signs and the signals you ignore during the process. If you don't know what signs or signals I'm talking about, you can watch the previous videos for more context. I'll link them down below so they can help you understand the self-leadership framework better. In short, I'm talking about those micro moments. I think you'll recognize a couple of them. Something like the hesitation before you say yes, or the subtle purse of the lips when someone makes a comment. These moments don't look dramatic, and they're not painful enough for us to take immediate action. That's sort of the reason why we ignore them too. I used to have this one coach on my team. He was a pain in everybody's because he had this habit of not following procedures. Back then, I always tried to find the bright side of situations like that. I tell myself something like, having someone challenging the systems and the rules in the company isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that can sort of help us improve our pain points, right? Anyway, what he did was that he would usually try to find loopholes in our rules or in our systems, and he would make inappropriate jokes to his colleagues, like female ones specifically. And to no one's surprise, there was one time he went way too far and said something that sounded very much like discrimination. I don't want to get too much into the details, but in short, he ended up getting sued for verbal harassment and other related issues. My point is, looking back at those tiny incidents and small jokes now, I can clearly see the patterns of his behavior. However, I hadn't developed the skills I have today back then. According to neuroscience research, your nervous system processes information faster than your conscious mind does. It picks up a lot of stuff, like micro power shifts, tone changes, inconsistencies, or the patterns that haven't even fully formed yet. So I used to wonder, if our bodies already have all the information we need, why couldn't we make better decisions back then? And here's what I think. Our body notices the information before our thoughts organize. But because we can't fully explain or understand it yet, plus the pressure of the moment, we override it and persuade ourselves it's not such a big deal. We tell ourselves things like, I don't want to cause drama, it's not a big deal, it's nothing, I don't have enough evidence, blah blah blah. But what we didn't know back then is that the first signal is often the beginning of a trajectory. The first impression often sets the tone for future interactions. Have you ever had someone say to you, you're the responsible one, we can always count on you? Usually they say this with a smile and a laugh, and most of the time it sounds like praise. If you find fulfillment in being the caregiver in a group, I'm genuinely happy for you. I get it, I really do. But if you're not, think about it. Why did that statement, that praise, make you feel uncomfortable? Sometimes the reason isn't just, now I have more responsibility. It's also the assumption. The person saying that probably think that you're the person who carries the load for the team. Someone with high threshold before pushing back. Someone who is safe to rely on. And by safe, I mean, they sorta assume you won't refuse the burden and responsibility. And that's exactly the moment that most of us ignore. That's when the first friction appears. It isn't loud, it's subtle. Just a small alert on our body that something isn't aligned. And most of the time, we override it. Then, we end up setting a trajectory we later regret. In the coach that I mentioned earlier, those small moments, the inappropriate jokes, the bending of rules, the subtle disrespects, my body had noticed those signals. But I didn't act. I told myself, it's not worth making a scene, it's not a big deal, I'm overreacting. Looking back now, I realized the tension was not just discomfort. It was pre-decision information. It was the first signal that the path I was on could lead to harm for myself, for my team, for the company. So with all the experience and information I've shared so far, it all comes down to this. First signals aren't dramatic. They don't scream. The subtle cues and hunches you get in certain situations, that's your nervous system's trying to guide you and warn you, pay attention. Making conscious choices out of those subtle cues takes practice. The more you practice this self-leading skill, the more clarity and control you'll have over your influence and authority. If this resonates with you, you can use the worksheet down below to track those signals in your own life. Take a moment and pause, notice the tension, and notice how you react. Doing this regularly is like training your body and mind to catch regret before it grows. And if you felt those signals before and ignored them, you're not alone. I've been there too, more times than I can count. And for those who has been watching the Lead Yourself series since the first episode, you might be wondering why we've been using the same worksheet all along. Like I mentioned earlier, it takes practice to get good at something. Even talented people need repetition to master a skill to train it into a reflex. According to cognitive science, that's how our nervous systems work. The more we repeat, the faster the skill becomes our default. In the next episode, we'll talk about how people test our limits without ever saying a word, and how our responses, even small ones, set the trajectory for everything that follows. We'll talk about how to spot those subtle tests and how our first responses matter far more than our reactions later. If you haven't yet, I also recommend checking out the previous episodes because they build the foundation of what we're exploring today. And now, notice the subtle cues and tension from your body. Pause, hesitation, something's off. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye!